Hi, welcome to this first European Repair Café webinar. I'm Martin Charter from the Centre for Sustainable Design at UCA, and this event is being brought to you by UCA and the Business School with support from Research England and partnership with the Repair Café Foundation. I'll be the sort of chair and facilitator today, and we have a sort of active program of presentations, panel discussions, and breakout rooms. And without sort of further ado, my background to this really is we undertook the first 2 surveys of repair cafes globally, and then collaborated with Voter, who you'll hear from later, on a 3rd survey. But also I founded and chair a repair cafe in the UK that started in 2014, where we're now 70 sessions down the line, and were the first charity in the UK. So without further ado, I'll pass across to Martine. And Martine is the founder of the Repair Cafe movement back nearly sort of 12 plus years ago, and Martine's going to give a bit of an overview of global repair cafe activities. So I'll pass across to Martine.
Next slide, please. For many years now, our website repaircafe.org has provided a digital starter kit in 5 languages, which guides you step by step through the process of organizing and setting up a repair cafe. And next slide, please. This is the kit. It's a manual and lots of additional documents. And in the last 12 years, this kit has been used by thousands of volunteers worldwide. And if we could go to the next slide, then you'll see that this has resulted in almost 2,500 repair cafes that we know of in 40 countries across the globe, from the Netherlands to Australia and from the UK to South Korea and Japan. And this map, I know it's not complete, since not all repair cafes reported back to us after having started their own repair cafe. And meanwhile, there are also other separate organizations running similar networks on a regional or national scale. Next slide, please. Of course, there may be cultural differences in how the repair cafes in all these countries are run. For instance, as you can see on the right of this slide, in Bengaluru, they have an online schooling program for kids with a slightly different approach than we would have in the Netherlands. But the similarities between all these initiatives are much bigger than the differences. And the photo on the left, for instance, is from a repair cafe in South Korea. And that's a typical repair cafe picture that could have been taken anywhere. And such pictures always show the same key aspects. There are always rooms full of people and tools and broken items. There are people working together, concentrating. We see people proudly posing with their repaired item. And these are pretty much the same wherever you go. Next slide, please. And in the last few months, we have seen a true revival of repair cafes after the pandemic. And that's great, for we know that many repair cafe organizers have had trouble keeping their volunteers involved when it wasn't possible to come together for so long. And I know that many organizers were not sure that their volunteers would return. And no doubt a number of them have left and have found other activities to pursue. But it turns out that a great many of them have been very happy to get back to repairing at the local repair cafe. And luckily, we also see many people starting new repair cafes. Last year in 2021, we counted only 136 new repair cafes in our network, but in the first 6 months of this year, we have already seen an increase of 160 new repair cafes on the world map. So that's wonderful. although of course there is still room for many, many more. Next slide, please. Like in society as a whole, the pandemic has also accelerated certain developments within the Repair Café community. One is the use of online meetings, which several repair cafes have held during the pandemic, for people to ask questions or to get repair advice. And this was then done instead of the physical meeting. But in non-pandemic times, this could very well be an extra service that a repair cafe could offer apart from the physical repair meeting. In this scenario, you could come to the repair cafe with your broken item on, let's say, the first Saturday of the month. But if you had a question or you just wanted some advice, then you could, for instance, have an online chat with a volunteer on Tuesday evening. And this could really be an addition to the service that repair cafes offer to their community. Next, please. And we've also seen other changes during the pandemic. For instance, many repair cafes have organized their way of working more systematically, like Repair Cafe Redcliffe Peninsula in Australia. They ask visitors to pre-register their repair via an online form, and then they match items with specific repairers, and they give visitors a specific time slot too. During the pandemic, this was a good way to prevent rooms becoming too crowded, but this can also work in non-COVID times, for it enables volunteers to prepare for a certain repair, maybe to look up some information in advance or collect the right tools for the repair. And for the visitor, this could also work well. For many people like to have an appointment at a specific time rather than going somewhere without knowing how long they're going to have to wait. And these are all innovations that have come up during the pandemic, but may become part of the normal procedure of repair cafes. And I think that's very good, for such innovations can expand the repair infrastructure. And that's exactly what we need. We need a richer repair infrastructure to fit the circular economy. Next slide, please. And that's why I am also happy with other experiments that are now being carried out here in the Netherlands by repair cafes in collaboration with other organizations. For instance, we're running a pilot now called the Repair Studio. This is a picture of the kickoff event. And this project involves 4 local repair cafes and a large handyman chain store called Café. And the idea is that people in these 4 places can now not only go to the repair cafe with their broken items, but they can also bring them to the store, to Café. And there the volunteers will pick the items up, will repair them in their own time, and then we'll bring them back to Café where the visitor can collect them. And in this way, Café wants to stimulate repair and to contribute to their own goals in terms of sustainability. And for the repair cafe, it's a way to promote themselves locally, to repair more broken items, and also to raise some extra income. For Café donates €5 per repair to the local repair cafe. Next, please. And there are other experiments too. This is another picture from a thrift store in Apeldoorn, which is another city in the Netherlands. Here they have a repair cafe counter where you can book a session with a repairer every day. And these repairers work in the store and they have other tasks too. But when you book a session on, let's say, Monday afternoon at 3 o'clock for your vacuum cleaner, they will make sure that there is repairer with the right skills available at that time to take a look at your vacuum cleaner together with you. So these are all slightly different ways of working than in a traditional repair cafe, but I think we need all these additional experiments to enrich the repair infrastructure and find out which approach works best. Next, please. For eventually, the circular economy needs a repair infrastructure that is as rich and as diverse as the infrastructure for buying new items. So yes, we do need repair cafes where you can go once a month, once a week for free, and where you can have an inspiring repair experience and where you can learn how to fix your own things, how to take care of items, and how to maintain them. But we also need repair services where you can drop an item off and pick it up later. And these services need not be free. It's perfectly okay to pay for a repair, but it should be an affordable fee and not 50 euros for an item which costs 70 or which costs 30 euros in the shop. Next slide, please. So I think at this moment, we're in a transition phase where people begin to understand that repair is really important and should not exclusively be a volunteer activity. People begin to understand that there should be other services too, and that we badly need professional repairers in the circular economy of the future, and that these professionals need to be schooled today. So that's why, next slide, please. For some years, we have been pushing for the reintroduction of repairing as a school subject in the Netherlands. And we're working together with education professionals to reintroduce this subject at vocational schools. We're meeting a lot of enthusiasm and of course a lot of hurdles too. So it will take some more time to get this done, but we're on the way there and we're very dedicated to it. And the same with Right to Repair, which we promote as much as possible. The best way for us to do this is to keep showing that more and more people want to make repairs and want products that can be repaired. And I think that the ongoing growth of the Repair Café network provides the best evidence of this and constitutes the strongest argument for taking measures in favor of repair. And therefore, I can only encourage you all to keep doing your wonderful work and to keep inspiring your local community to join you. And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
So, thank you very much, Martine, and we'll come back to Martine just in a short while, and we'll get into a conversation. And please put any questions that you might have into the chat box. So I'm now setting up Vota's presentation, and hopefully it has come up okay. Is this showing okay there, Vota?
Yes, it is. Yeah, thank you very much. Shall I just get along with it then?
Yeah, go for it.
Yes. So my name is Wouter Spekking. I am an assistant professor at the Erasmus University of Rotterdam. Where one of the things I did research on a couple of times is the Repair Café community. I'm generally interested in topics related to sustainability and governance. That's very broad, but one of the things that comes up a lot is community initiatives for sustainability. And Repair Cafés have been one of my fascinations for a while. So you can go to the next slide, Martin. Because this talk is about a study that I did together with Martin and with Malte Reudel. We did the study a couple of years ago, and it's a study where it's a very modest study in a way. We did surveys among the Repair Café community as well as the precious plastic community, which is a community that focuses on local plastic recycling, building their own plastic recycling machines. I won't be going into that much today, but I might make some comparisons here and there. But we did this survey. It's something that Martin has done twice before. We sort of picked it up from there. Based on the survey that we did then, We also published some public reports, but now we're also writing a paper, which is still in review, where we do a kind of analysis of what kind of community the repair cafes are. I'm going into that in this presentation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the question, is the repair cafe community something that you could refer to as a translocal community? And I will explain a little bit what that means actually further on. And I am also placing this into the context of the place of initiatives like repair cafes in the circular economy discourse. But to explain how that works out, I suggest we move on to the next slide. So let me start with this concept of translocal community. What does it actually mean? So I put up a rather formal definition of it here, the interconnected initiatives based on models circulated through transnational grassroots networks. So basically what that means is a translocal community consists of many initiatives that are built on a similar model. So like repair cafes are, right? Repair cafe, you can see there's a kind of model that appears in many different places in the world right now. And that model is also being circulated through, for example, an organization like the Repair Cafe International Foundation. What is interesting about it and what fascinates, well, it basically captures something that fascinates me about the Repair Cafe community, is that it's at the same time, you know, you have local initiatives that are also very locally oriented and very locally rooted and make a local difference. But at the same time, they're also a community that crosses borders. And this combination of qualities is something that I find fascinating and that the concept of translocal community tries to capture. So if you move on to the next point, you know, this describes some of the things that are interesting, I think, about translocal communities, and that they are this combination of deploying a generalized model, but then in very locally specific contexts. I think that Martina really nicely described that before, that of course, there are certain cultural differences, but there are also certain things that you see everywhere, you know, in repair cafes that are sort of shared by them. And another thing that they combine is that they are place dependent, they are locally rooted, but at the same time they are nationally networked or internationally networked. So, you know, those are some interesting combination of qualities that are fascinating about translocal communities. Can we move on to the next slide? I'll get back to that point a little bit later, but first I would like to say something about repair cafes in the circular economy. I think most of you will be aware or will be somewhat familiar with this idea of circular economy. But just very briefly, of course, it's about the general idea that currently our economy is organized in a very linear way. We take things, we make things out of them, and then we generally dispose of the waste and of the products after using them for a certain time. And the ideal of a circular economy is that we reduce waste, for example, by circulating materials more in our economy, by reusing, by reducing the use of products in the first place, or by recycling. And of course, repair cafes fit very neatly into this idea. Martina also brought it up in her presentation. But if you look at the academic literature on circular economy, and I also think, although I haven't studied that in detail, but if you look at the political discourse on circular economy, you see that it is quite heavily dominated by a certain narrative that emphasizes the role of, for example, companies in circular economy. So they emphasize the need for companies to develop circular business models and the need for policymakers to create policies that facilitate that. They don't very often speak about civil society, so like about people in general. If they do speak about civil society, it's usually in the role of consumer, which is also why I have the picture of basically a regular consumption on the right here. And this is kind of unfortunate because there are actually initiatives like repair cafes, like precious plastic, which are civil society initiatives that play a much richer role in the transition to a circular economy than the idea of a consumer will. Right, so one of my motivations to do this study also has to do with this dominant narrative that is somewhat unfortunate. Can you move on to the next point? Right, because initiatives like repair cafes, you could say, prefigure a role for civil society that's much richer. This prefigure means that basically you could understand initiatives like repair cafes as already practicing an alternative society, and a society in which repairing is a normal part of everyday life, within, you know, an existing society, within the society that we are trying to influence. So that's what the idea of prefiguration stands for, which is much more than the idea of a consumer that simply buys circularly produced products, right? This is a kind of impoverished view of what people can do in a circular economy. The question is, though, can initiatives like repair cafes, like precious plastic, challenge the dominant narrative about circular economy, this narrative in which businesses are in the lead? And that's how I circle back to this idea of translocal communities. If you can go to the next slide. So here an interesting point comes up that was fairly recently discussed in relation to this idea of translocal communities, translocal networks. And that is the idea that they can develop transformative potential. And transformative potential, very briefly, basically means that these communities have the potential to change their institutional environment, which would include changing these dominant narratives, changing policy, having a real influence on how we think about where to take society and economy on a grander scale. And well, this has to do something with the critical mass that these translocal networks can develop, right? So there's a kind of strength in numbers, you could say. Again, referring back to Martina's presentation, where she said the strongest evidence that there are a lot of people that want the right to repair is the fact that there are so many repair cafes, right? So that's kind of what captures this idea of a critical mass that translocal communities might bring. But there are some other ingredients that the literature suggests are important if these translocal communities want to have an impact on their environment, which is also a shared identity, which you can understand. Well, you know, we see each other as belonging to the same community, also having a shared sense of purpose. And then there's a third one, which is a bit more complicated, which is political voice. We sort of, in the paper that we wrote about this, we understand political voice as kind of having a narrative about the future, like an alternative future, having a certain idea of which organizations are important in promoting that future, or maybe you know, holding back that future, and having a narrative about how do we actually get to that future, and explicitly sharing that voice out in the open, engaging with other actors out there to try to make that future a reality. That's more or less how you can look at it. Can we go to the next slide? Or the next point. So the question that we basically asked in this paper is, do we find these ingredients in the repair cafe community? Basically based on the interest, you know, is the repair cafe community something that has the potential to actually change the way we think about, for example, something like circular economy, the place of civil society in that? That is the question that we asked in this paper. Next slide, please. So let me tell you a little bit about what data did we base this on. So I already mentioned that we did this survey, which is a kind of a continuation in some ways of a survey that Martin had already conducted twice before. We did slightly change some of the questions. It ended up being, you know, for the repair cafe community, it ended up being a survey of 27 questions. And we sent this out to the repair cafe communities with the only, well, there was one unfortunate exception that we didn't have the Belgian repair cafes on the mailing list to which the survey was distributed. So we missed that part of the repair cafe community, which is quite a significant part as well. But we received 303 responses, which we calculated to be about 14% of the repair cafes that we approached. Another limitation I should add is we didn't design this survey specifically with this idea of translocal networks in mind. This idea to look at the data from that angle came up later. So we were also kind of limited in how far we could take that idea, obviously. And we also supplemented our knowledge that we gathered from the survey with background knowledge based on documentation that you can find out in the open, as well as our own personal experience. And then primarily Martin's experience was, of course, vital because of his practical engagement with the repair cafe community. Next slide, please. So let me, before I go into these different aspects of, is the repair cafe like a translocal community, I thought it was nice to just share some more general findings that we have. Because especially comparing what we found on the repair cafes to the precious plastic community, we found kind of more uniformity in how repair cafes are organized. So they're usually organized monthly. They are chiefly non-commercial, almost exclusively. They have between 4 to 20 volunteers. They have between 10 and 30 visitors on average. They most often take place in public buildings that they usually can use for free, as I understood. Also compared to the precious plastic community, repair cafes tend to be more concentrated in Western Europe and what you could call the global north. Not exclusively, but primarily. Whereas the precious plastic community, you already see that in the global south they have quite a strong presence as well, compared to the repair cafes. And repair cafes vary quite a bit in how they are organized in terms of how formal they are organized and what kind of legal status they have adopted. So those are more like general things that we found on repair cafes. Next slide, please. Then one question that we of course had is, to what extent does networking occur in the repair cafe community? So what we did is we asked our we presented our respondents with a couple of statements, and some of those statements included things on networking. So is your repair cafe member of a regional network, or is it a member of a national network? And here you see part of the data set. I didn't list all the countries here just to make it fit on the slide. The countries, what you see on the left are the countries, and behind that is the number of respondents we had from that country. So from Germany, we had 86 respondents, for example. And then on the right, you see how many of those respondents said that they are a member of either a regional network or a national network. So what this picture kind of shows, what we found is that you do see regional and national networking going on. Not everywhere. The presence is clearest in countries like Germany, Netherlands, and France. Right, so you do see some networking going on, but not necessarily everywhere, and not everyone in those countries also is part of those networks per se. Which basically led us to say, well, it's not one grand network. You could look at the repair cafe community as a collection of networks of different extents across the globe. Next slide, please. Another question that we asked has to do something with shared identity. Well, we had a couple of things that maybe give you some indication of the extent to which there's a shared identity in the repair cafe community. One of which was basically, what kind of goals do repair cafes set for themselves? And how we asked about this is basically we presented our respondents with a list of possible goals that you could have with your repair cafe, and they varied a little bit in their focus. Some were more environmental, like helping to prevent and reduce waste. Some were more social, like creating a space where people from the neighborhood can meet, and some were maybe more personal. And then we asked our respondents to rank them from 1 to 9, which goals are more important. And you see that the majority of our respondents do rank the prevention and reduction of waste first, or a lot of them rank it that way, or they rank it relatively highly, or encouraging visitors to repair more often. So the somewhat environmental goals in waste reduction or encouraging people to repair tend to be ranked highly rather consistently. Of course, there are exceptions, because you also see that there are repair cafes that actually rank social goals first, which is also kind of what I also would expect to see, because some repair cafes I spoke with actually prioritize the social element of their work. But what's also interesting is that if you compare this to a similar question that we asked for the precious plastic community, this shows a much clearer pattern. It shows much more that people tend to agree on prevention and reducing waste as one of the most important goals, and most of the respondents agree on that. So that does indicate some shared sense of purpose, you could say, that we see in here. And another way in which you could say there's a sense of shared identity is that 89% of the respondents say that the repair cafe makes use of the official repair cafe logo. Yes, so next slide, please. And then about political voice, which is a lot more complicated to investigate. Also, we didn't have questions that very clearly related to the idea of political voice in our survey. But we did have a lot of discussions about this as well among ourselves. And basically what we sort of, the point that we come to is that basically local repair cafes are not explicitly political if you understand politics in a more narrow sense, right? More discursively political, getting out there and getting your story out and getting involved with politics. Because local repair cafes tend to be mostly practical in their approach, right? They promote alternative futures and alternative practices by actually engaging with these practices and getting people involved in a very practical manner. So if you could argue there's this idea in academia about material politics. So you could understand it as a kind of material politics, engaging in politics in a very material sense. Okay, but you know, we sort of decided they're not explicitly political, although we do see the Repair Café International Foundation, of course, engage in things that you can understand as political activities. So partly as being a part of the broader right to repair movement. I also remember watching, I think, a broadcast of a radio show. It was also recorded on video, where Martina, for example, commented on I think it was in November 2 years ago or something, where the European Parliament decided to enshrine certain aspects of the right to repair in European policy, right? So the part of what made that possible is also lobbying activities of this right to repair movement, and in which the Repair Café International Foundation also has a certain part. But I would also point to the Repair Monitor that the Repair Café International Foundation has launched some time ago. For example, I've already seen that members of parliament do refer to the Repair Monitor sometimes when they ask questions in parliament about the right to repair. So you see that it is kind of politicized in that way, right? It becomes part of a political activity. And I think, you know, just more generally, media presence of the Repair Café International Foundation also to some extent can be understood as a political activity. But it seems to be something that primarily an organization as the Repair Café International Foundation would do. Not so much individual repair cafes, except maybe that when we asked the question about what do you think is important for the future, many repair cafes did mention that engaging in campaigns was part of that, although you have to wonder if that is feasible, right? Do repair cafes actually have the resources to do such a thing? So I get to my conclusions. So we decided to typify repair cafes as a translocal community, not necessarily a network, because that for us created too much of a sense that it is one big network, but it is a translocal community that includes multiple networks within it, and also that are different in size. So there is some critical mass that is being developed, but it is kind of unevenly developing, you could say. There is a strong sense of shared identity and purpose. I think you will probably all recognize that. But little to no evidence of political voice, except if you look at activities like that of the Repair Café International Foundation. And I would also add to that, you know, I guess the literature on translocal networks mostly focuses on initiatives that are more radical in nature, that have a more radical idea about how to change society. And I think that's also kind of a difference with the repair cafes, which are more practical in their focus and also in the way that they try to bring about change. And I leave you with one question, you know, is this enough to challenge these dominant narratives on circular economy? I think it's vital that the ideas on circular economy that you can extrapolate from repair cafes, from initiatives like repair cafes, that they get a stronger place in how we talk about circular economy in academia and politics. But I don't see it happening that much yet. I still see these dominant narratives in which civil society is kind of reduced to a consumer. So I'll leave you with that note. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Wouter. Hopefully, we can we'll sort of now move into some questions and observations with Wouter and Martine. So my screen is moving around here. I can't see the chat. It's moved into another box. But anyway, we'll start off with some sort of general types of questions. I've got some specific questions for Martine and then Wouter, and then a general discussion, and we'll try and pick up some more general points. And a lot of things that Martine was talking about was things we recognise from our repair cafe that is sort of been running for a fair time now. So absolutely started to see innovation emerge, and so we also did online things. We found certain things worked, certain things didn't. We found very basic things like setting up WhatsApp groups to network, people. We've taken that forward and expanded that to keep people connected, which we didn't have before this. So it's very interesting, Martine, to hear about those innovations and particularly then thinking about how some are starting to sort of integrate into perhaps the high street, and how the model is starting to change a bit. So if you wanted to just say a bit more about the innovation side and how, in effect, maybe the pandemic has changed and evolved things in a different way.
Well, I think we clearly see that the pandemic has accelerated many changes, and well, as for repair cafes, they were not possible to be held during the pandemic. So people were really committed to finding an alternative and to keeping people involved, and try to do what was possible when the original repair cafe meeting was not possible. So yeah, we've seen lots of changes and innovations and additions and improvements and experiments, and I think that's well, the essence of the repair cafe community, that these are all people who like to come up with solutions to problems and who like to, well, they're tinkerers, so they like to adapt and adjust and improve and to make a thing their own. And we see that with the repair cafe too. When I started, I had the idea that everyone was just going to copy what I handed to them in the starter kit with the logo, but this has all developed. And in the beginning, well, I worried about that because I thought, is it going to be recognizable if it's so, if there are multiple forms but well, I think it's the essence of the community, that it's diverse. It consists of people who want to make something their own. So they want to make changes and additions, and I think we need all these additions in the end, because it's a massive change from where we are now to a vital circular economy. And I think that repairing needs to be at the heart of such an economy, such a society, and that all experiments run by repair cafes and related groups are very valuable. And yeah, they should all belong at the core of the circular economy. So actually, I'm very happy with everything that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, talking from our perspective, but also some webinars we ran in the UK, there was this sense of people experimenting with new models under the constraint of COVID. So just from our side, we tried some Facebook advice sessions, but they didn't really work as well as we hoped, and that was some other experience. But what we then did, similar to what you said, was we set up something called a drop-off model, where people would drop off the products and then your repairs would collect the products with also a booking system, similarly what you said. But the bit that was missing there was the social dimension. So we could do the repair bit, we didn't get that sense of community. And what we found that sort of backs that point up a little bit, at least from our experience, is that when we did our own survey of customers, the classic 100 customers or visitors, their prime motivation to come to Repair Cafe was to repair, and they often 60% came out with a repair, but what they didn't come in with, but they came out with, was this community feel. So it was that repair and community, but they weren't thinking of that community bit initially when they came in. But that's one of the elements about why people return as well, because of that community feel. So I think that's really interesting, there. So, and I think, as you were suggesting, some of that innovation will be retained and change. And perhaps going to you, Wouter, on this discussion, we had a lot about the political dimension, and essentially this, picking up on a number of the points here about the very pragmatic nature of repair cafes, very practical. The sorts of people that are getting involved are often doing it, because they like to get stuff done. But I think the other element may be, and we found it quite difficult to define this politically. We had a lot of discussion about how you define politics, which was, but there is certainly, again, from our experience, I mean, working with local authorities, and, in the UK, I only learned through our repair cafe that the town clerk in the UK, in our town of 40,000 people, is like the chief executive of the town. I never knew that. And he's very helpful for us, and he's worked with us and he's cooperated with us. And the mayor, every mayor comes in and likes to have a photograph at the repair cafe. So that's a sort of local political dimension that I've seen, at least in our experience, is perhaps more, relevant. And I wondered if you sort of had anything from your broader experience about that sort of local political, considerations.
Yeah, maybe not really personal experience, but it does remind me that we also asked in this survey, we also asked, for example, if people are a member of other organizations, if members of the repair cafes are also a member of other organizations, including if they are politically active. And I do believe that a fair share of the respondents indicated that at least some of their members are also politically active locally. And of course, that's also a way in which the politics around this probably play a role. And I think, I mean, that's certainly not something to be neglected. But I do think that that's not the main contribution, I guess, of an initiative like Repair Cafes, in the sense that I also don't want to underestimate or undervalue the value actually of the doing this practical work, actually experimenting with alternative practices in the context of a repair cafe, and trying to also let that seep through in general society, right? Basically, I guess, like, as the ambition is to bring repairing back as a normal practice in society. That's highly powerful, I think, even though it's much less sort of visible, maybe, or audible, I should say, than engaging in discursive politics. Like, if you could, that's very different from comparing it to something like Extinction Rebellion, right? Which is really about making your voice heard in a very explicit way. Yeah,
I mean, and that actually links into some experience we had, where we had one repairer who was very active with Extinction Rebellion, and without the trustees, in a sense, permission, started to leaflet within the repair cafe on Extinction Rebellion, and we asked to stop that, because whilst we might have a broader, sympathy, within at least our repair, we wanted to keep it apolitical, in a sense, and not be used as an audience, a captive audience to distribute, a particular perspective on environmental perspective. So I think there's a lot in this dimension, and I think, I would perceive, that Martin and the Repair Cafe Foundation with others have been a strong voice in the political element to get maybe the message of right to repair across to the European Commission that's now embedded in the Circular Economy Action Plan and is creating other activities. So I think it's led to this very, interesting conversation about what does politics mean at different levels and who are political stakeholders, et cetera, So the other couple of more broad-based questions is that, as was highlighted in the survey, that we've seen particularly, in Germany, Netherlands, and France, the emergence of national networks and regional networks. And prior to the pandemic, when we ran a UK event, we suddenly became aware that were emergent regional networks that nobody of us knew anything about. I just sort of wondered if maybe either of you had any sort of comments on the emergence of those national or regional networks and any sort of different cultural drivers that might be happening in different countries as to why you're seeing it more organized in Germany and less organized in the UK, for example. And maybe Martine, if you want to have a comment, and then Wouter.
Yeah, well, I think that the organizers who pick this up, or the national organizations or regional organizations are, in many cases, there are existing organizations who have their own goal and who see this kind of community events as another way to reach their own goal. So they are focused, dedicated organizations who have a firm contact with the local people, and I think it's inevitable for things like Repair Café, which has been taken up worldwide, to have smaller organizations behind it, because the worldwide level is simply too large to answer to all the questions locally. Like in my presentation, Repair Café in India is different than a Repair Café in South Korea or in the UK or in the Netherlands. So, well, eventually, I think it's a good thing that it becomes, that it has a national or regional base too.
Yeah, Wouter, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I agree with that point as a first comment. And I think also thinking a little bit about how does this happen. Obviously, there's already a kind of more tacit connection between Repair Cafés from the get-go, right? Because it is a kind of model that people hear about, that they pick up on, and that they want to implement, in their own local community. So there is a kind of connection to this community from the start. And I guess when we are talking about networks, we were, of course, talking more about connections that are acted upon more, like actual knowledge exchange and actual interactions between Repair Cafés. And I think you very often see the desire of that happening from the bottom up as well. Once there's a number of these like-minded initiatives being set up, obviously it's interesting to exchange knowledge and experiences with each other. And in general, I think it's there might be a sort of desire behind it from people to hook up with like-minded people and see what you can learn from each other. And I completely agree with Martina. It's only it wouldn't be realistic to have one grand global network that all comes back to one organization that's sort of needs to coordinate that. So it makes a lot of sense that a lot of these networks emerge regionally, sometimes nationally, based on that desire.
Yeah, I mean, I think just from my personal observation of that, I mean, I think certain cultural characteristics coming on maybe organization at a regional, local level, and I mean, some issues that have emerged to us, us as just an example on the ground, is we are supporting just proactively at the development of other repair cafes. So we're almost an informal regional network around our area. We've been asked, by bodies to set up something regionally, or even nationally. But again, like everybody else who's running repair cafes, we're volunteers. We've got limited time. Of course, one can set up a regional network or a national, but that's a lot of time and resource to do that. Who's going to do it? Does it represent the views of all the different? So there's lots of questions that emerge on regional and national networks. So I know there's a number of specific questions, very specific questions, and I think we'll roll those over into the panel discussion. But just finishing in the general discussion here, Wouter and Martin, where do you see the repair cafe movement being in the next sort of 5 years, based on, Martin, your experience? And you've disappeared from my screen here. I don't know, hopefully you're still here.
But still here.
Yeah, I see you now. You've popped back up again. And Wouter, maybe from the research, thinking through what you saw, where 5 years' time, how do you see it?
Well, I think that, in 5 years' time, ideally, repair cafes would be one part of the entire repair infrastructure. So they could function as a doctor for problems with stuff, really. It's just a place, very low-key place where you can go when you have a problem with your vacuum cleaner or your coffee maker or your bicycle. You just want some advice. You want some expert to help you. But and you can go there to have an eye-opening experience, which is very valuable in motivating people for a more sustainable lifestyle. So there will always be room for repair cafes, for community repair events. But they should not be the only repair infrastructure. And we also need professional repairers that are open every day, where you can go, you can make an appointment, or you can leave your item and pick it up a week later. And people in the repair cafe network sometimes say that they oppose such, they're not for such repair services because they value the social aspect. But then I always say that it need not be either this or that. We need both the social repair event and the professional or commercial repair service, because it needs to be an alternative for buying a new product. And if you can only go for a repair once a month, it's simply not enough.
I mean, just before passing to Wouter, I mean, just again, from our micro example, we made the decision not to offer phone repair because there were commercial operators, or offering phone repair. So that idea of the repair ecosystem, some of it may be voluntary, some of it may be commercial, how that all works as a sort of ecosystem is still sort of evolving. Again, what we found is one of the challenges is often that people can't find the repairers. They're not cost effective. There are also other broader things like shoe repair that we wouldn't do, for example, because it's quite specialist. So there's a lot of specialist repair stuff. And it's how almost one maps that all out as one element of the broader sort of circular economy approach. So, Wouter, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I got really excited by what Martina presented about these different experiments as well. I think that, a short answer to your question is I have the impression that repair cafes are a rather stable model, and that in 5 years' time we probably still see more of these repair cafes. I'm curious to see how that develops, right? How the number of repair cafes, the growth in that, how that develops in the 5 years' time. But I expect that we will still see a lot of repair cafes of the similar model at that time. But I'm most excited, I guess, about these different things that Martina presented about other ways in which people can engage with repair, because that has been something on my mind for a while. I also saw people mention in the chat somewhere, is this something that mostly attracts people from a certain generation. And I know that this has also been a debate, right, in the Repair Café community. And I do believe that different models of engaging with repair that do keep the social element, and that do keep this element of being involved in repairs yourself when it's something you're not that familiar with, which is something, you know, many generations now suffer from. I think it's a very good idea to look for different ways in which you can make it appealing for people, in which you can make it part of their life again. And I hope that's also what happens more over time, that not only through the Repair Café community, but through the wider repair movement, that people become skilled again, and that also this becomes a more important part of how we look at the future in terms of circular economy. Again, that we're not just consumers that are able to read labels and buy circularly produced products, but that we are skilled people that play a meaningful part in the circular economy, also to repairing things and recycling things and so on. Yeah.
Great. I mean, I as Martin presented there, I'm expecting, you know, repair cafes, you know, to grow quite considerably, because I think another element of this is because of COVID and people working more, that accelerating flexible working, people are spending more time in their communities often now compared to the past. So that might be another driver also for, you know, people wanting to look back into their communities, and this is one area. And I've just got one last question for Martin. I know there are many questions and observers' hands up at the moment, and we're not going to be able to answer everything, but we will try and pick these up in the other discussions, and please bring them through into the breakout rooms. But I just wanted to ask Martin just a very practical question, whether you've seen or whether you're picking up from your conversations, whether the attendance at the repair cafes is picking up to the pre-COVID levels, because from our side, we're probably 10–15% down on what we were before pre-COVID levels in terms of visitors. What are you picking up more generally?
Well, we don't have exact numbers, but I do hear from local organizers that they attract many visitors, and that they hear from their visitors that they're so happy that they can come to the Repair Cafe again. That yeah, so I don't have the idea that it's less than before COVID. But then again, I don't have exact numbers.
Interesting. I've just seen a number pop up from Lorna. They're much lower than pre-COVID. So that's interesting. I mean, yeah, from our side, it's quite notable. I mean, we still get good numbers, but it's lower than COVID. And going back to one of your earlier points, we've had a sort of return over time of different repairers. You know, one's just returned now because he's had caring duties with his parents, and he's just not wanted to come, and others just haven't wanted to come to sort of physical events. So I think there's a sort of attrition, you know, or the reverse of attrition, you know, almost like some people have kept away from physical events, whether they're repairers or maybe even visitors. They've just wanted to do things in the open air. So I think, you know, that's something we've observed actually in the local community, almost the opposite side in talking to the editor of the local newspaper and the mayor. They've seen huge increase in people attending outdoor events. So that's quite an interesting point there. So I'd just like to thank everybody, you know, both Martin and Wouter very much for their time and their input, and please feel free to stay if you're able to. And we'll, as I say, I will try and pick up the comments and hands up, you know, I think in our panel. But as happened when we've run webinars with repair cafes in the past, if you see an opportunity to answer or comment on people's chats, please do. You know, we found, you know, as we'd find that repair cafes are very active and want to help each other. So if you've got observations, please carry on with your observations and thoughts. So thank you very much, Martin and Wouter. And now I'll introduce the panelists. and we're going to get into a sort of more hands-on discussion now. So this is Kate, Phoebe, Tom, and Jessica. Can you all sort of unmute yourselves if that's okay, and sort of just very 30 seconds introduce yourselves. Maybe if we just start with Kate.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hope you can. I'm Kate with Nicole, who's also on the panel from Cambridge Repair Café Network. I'd just like to say that we are quite a strong regional network already and have been for some time. I'm a volunteer from Transition Cambridge. Nicole's employed at Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and we also have some on our network, sort of, I suppose you might call it a steering group. We have Chris Muller, who is our technical expert from Cottenham Repair Cafe, and we have support from our local engineering company, Mackay's. We began our repair cafes in 2014. That's our first one, following on from what Royston's doing. And we now have a network, and I would say we have between 30 and 35 active repair cafes.
Great, thanks,
Nicole,
Kate.
there to carry on.
I think for time we've only got half an hour, so I think that's thanks very much from Cambridge there. Phoebe, perhaps you could just similarly introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Phoebe. I'm the director of Repair Cafe Wales. We're a national network of about 85 repair cafes. We've been running since 2017, and we're primarily funded by the Welsh Government to set up and support repair cafes, predominantly in Wales, but we've got a few in England and one up in Scotland as well. Great.
And Tom, if you're there. Tom Hansing.
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Yep.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm Tom Hansing. I'm working for Foundation Anstiftung from Munich. We are running the National Repair Initiatives Network with about 1,000 different initiatives on our platform, repairinitiatives.de. We do the local, regional, and national support system with open source information, schooling, as you call it. So some information on certain practices on how to repair, and other things. So we're up and running from 2013 now.
Great, thanks Tom. And last but no means least, Jessica, who is representing Sweden. It feels like the Eurovision Song Contest, but now in America, at a moment in America, or Canada, or somewhere else in the world. Oh, I think you're muted. Oh,
so I will. Hopefully you can hear me now.
Yeah.
Yes, representing all of Sweden, but really just a small repair cafe in Malmö. In 2017, we started, and we're one of the only ones. There's not very many in Sweden, so we are trying to get more involved with the Swedish network as well. But right now, just trying to keep our small one alive and well connected to other networks. So we're part of repaircafe.org. We're also part of Restart Project. We're also doing a lot of collaboration with Fix-It clinics in the US during COVID with the online. So we have a lot of experience and are also in the political right to repair movement. So very active for being a small repair cafe, but still just one repair cafe in one city in Sweden. Thanks.
Great, thanks all. I think what I'm going to do, because there's so many questions emerging in the chat box, is I'm going to pose, maybe a few key points. And maybe in one go, and if you could each sort of respond to that, and then we'll start to try and pick up some of these very specific questions that I know are emerging. So some generic questions, and then please, whoever wants to start. So what are the key lessons that you say, the one or two key lessons you would say for those who are thinking of setting up a repair cafe based on your experience? Again, on the ground, what do you think has been the main impact of COVID? And similarly, in your own initiatives, where do you see your own initiatives going the next sort of 3 to 5 years? So, maybe I'll just, who wants to start? Maybe,
yeah,
Nicole, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of a network, I think what we've found really useful is we're a very broad church. So we have 30 different groups running repair cafes. They can be parish councils, addiction recovery services, local authorities working on loneliness, green groups. So it's really broad. But I think we give people confidence to run the cafes by holding a 2-hour how to organise a repair cafe in your community workshop. So we do that twice a year. A few years ago, we used to get maybe 6 groups a year. Now it's about 26 groups this year. So it's just, for us, it's about giving them the confidence and then providing some of our volunteers for their very first cafes, some of our electrical engineers that go along and help them to make them feel confident. And I think the other thing is that most of the time it's not about money. People often say we need money to run a repair cafe. And we kind of say that's one of the last things you need. If you can have energy, then you'll run a good event and that will probably attract money afterwards. So I think that would be one of our key learnings. And make quality events. I think if you run a quality event, it keeps people coming back. We've had some of the same repairers now for 8 or 9 years.
And again, from my side, getting your core group or your core person who can coordinate it all. And maybe so let's keep on this particular line. Maybe Phoebe, do you have any key lessons from your network?
Yeah, I think picking up on what you've just said, Martin, for us, we have what we call an organizer, so the person that kind of takes ownership of the repair cafe, I guess a lead volunteer essentially. And we've learned from a bit of trial and error that having that person in place first is really important for us. So in the beginning, we kind of chose communities where there weren't repair cafes and kind of went in and said, look at this really cool thing that you could be doing, here's some funding, we'll help you do it. And actually those were the ones that weren't as successful. So now we only open repair cafes where there's on the ground demand, there's someone who's saying, I want to do this and kind of driving it forward, whether that's someone in the local authority or, you know, a member of the community. And that has led to far more sustainable repair cafes and repair cafes that have kind of kept going and built and grown when there's one person that kind of takes ownership for that event. So yeah, only opening them where there's demand and there's kind of grassroots need for that repair cafe.
Jessica or Tom, you know, any comments there?
I can strengthen that a lot. There is maybe the magic 5. You need definitely the organizing person, which has the power and the spirit to do it. But you also need the at least one repairer who's infected by the activity itself, because that sparks joy, and organizing not always sparks joy. And this is, so call it the magic 5. You need 5 people at least with a different activities. Even baking cake and doing the conversation and being nice to other people is a very important thing. And if you have these types of persons together, then a repair cafe can be set up and can be great. And so it depends on the people.
That's great. It's the diversity of skills. So it's not just about the repairers on the different products, but it's the very important person about the welcome desk, who's going to organize it all, who's going to set up the meetings of the organizing committee, etc., etc. So it's a range of skills are needed, and people have different motivations. Jessica, from the Swedish model, is just again slightly different, we found.
Yeah, I mean, some things are different, I think, but it comes, we have the same core need of having a core repair group of volunteers. And I think we found out at the beginning too, is that we have to care for ourselves as volunteers first and foremost. We got into a point where we were really where we were growing fast and we wanted to offer, you know, great customer service and started running events every week, and we were burning out quickly. So we scaled back on that and really looked at, okay, we're trying to build a community, not necessarily offer a professional service. And in fact, we then tried to look for where those professional services are offered in our community and send people there if that's what they're looking for, but also look after our repairers and building that community aspect and having a good community that takes care of repairers and our participants.
And maybe I'll move on to the next question while you're on Jessica, and then we can sort of pick up with others. So in terms of impact of COVID on your activities, has it led to some experimentation? Did you have to close? You know, what was the impact of COVID?
Yeah, we had to close our in-person events for sure. But actually, one very positive outcome of COVID is that we did hook in with our bigger networks. So we first experimented with having online events just for our local community, but we found actually partnering with Fix-It clinics, and I see Peter is here as well, and having global events through that we could access, have a community with a lot of UK people coming and North Americans and even people from India, Australia to events. It was super good for us and for our volunteers too, to just be able to meet with people that had far more experience, because we're quite a young group with a little less experience and less diversity of experience. So we could meet people who had repaired sewing machines that we didn't have much experience with and really learn. And we recorded those, and they were really good for what we had talked about in our Repair Cafe of having more development and skills sharing. And that was a great place to have this skill sharing where we could really access this great global group. So that was our experiment there, and it's now moved into Discord and is an ongoing chat. So we now have this I think hive mind of great repair skills sharing. So that was a positive outcome actually from COVID for us, that we now know this great network globally of very great repairs.
And again, just for others, I mean, a quite different model in Sweden was that there was a lot of active engagement with young people and who were learning by doing, by YouTube videos, which is again what, at least in our experience, and I know many others, is often it's the other end of the spectrum where you've got this lifetime of experience of repairers who are able to repair things based on their experience. So I think there's a very different sort of model in Sweden, which in itself is really interesting. So in terms of impact of COVID, maybe Tom, do you have any comments?
COVID was a big a mess for all. The most important thing is to bring back the courage, the confidence to restart now, because most of the people, they were very frightened in Germany. What is possible, what is not possible, and the main thing about the repair events is the social contact, is the social art of it. And we tried online, we tried drop off, we tried all this, and so. If I say we, I always mean them, because we're not actually setting up the repair cafes, but there are a lot of initiatives which are doing that locally. And now the most important thing is to find confidence again, to restart, because again the numbers are rising, and it's like a never-ending story, this COVID shit. And so to come over it, this is the most important issue at the moment.
So I recognise a number of those points again. Every monthly meeting, the trustees in our repair cafe have a discussion about what are the COVID numbers. Are we going to wear masks or make it voluntary now rather than mandatory? So, I recognise that issue. So, Nicole, do you have any comments about? I know you also set up some online approaches, and some things worked, some things didn't.
Yes, I think it stopped. Kind of things stopped in March 2020, didn't they? And I think by May we'd started a virtual repair cafe where we had people going into breakout rooms one-to-one with repairers. We did it for about 6 months, once a month. It didn't really work very well, but we couldn't repair things very well. But what we did find, it really kept the repair network together. So those repairers, those key repairers, kept coming together once a month. We'd organize it in between. So it really helped maintain the network. And another thing we did, which is something that Kate did, I'll let Kate explain.
Kate's not coming on, I think I'll go to Phoebe just for time. Sorry, because we've got such tight time if things don't work, and I know there's a lot of questions. So Phoebe?
Sure, yeah. We similarly tried things online and found them to not be popular at all. I think as soon as you removed the kind of social aspect of the repair cafes, people were far less interested. So much so that for our repair cafes, they preferred to have outdoor events, which is saying a lot in Wales given the weather. People were still fixing outdoors in the winter. But I think something that we found was there was far greater demand for repair cafes than we'd ever seen, which was a positive we weren't expecting. And I think that I think it came back to people kind of being stuck in their local area and really thinking about what they had in their local community and thinking how they could improve that. So that was a nice silver lining. But for us, another learning was the need for more younger volunteers. I think it really made us realise how many of our volunteers were vulnerable and weren't feeling confident, and that led to less volunteers coming back after COVID. But it really highlighted the fact that to be sustainable moving forward, and if we're really kind of future-proofing, we need more young people with skills and more young people getting involved in repair cafes.
And maybe just picking up on that, and if quickly we could just go through with a couple of thoughts on where we see things going in 3 to 5 years and critical issues. Again, from our point of view, you know, our mean age of our core repairers is probably, you know, 55 to 70, and that's an issue, you know. So this issue of how you bring young people on board, how you manage that, you know, when people are so busy in the repair cafe, is certainly a strategic issue we're coming. I don't know, Phoebe, you know, just very quickly, just 1 or 2 quick comments on where you think things are going to move on your side in the next sort of 3-5 years.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing a bit of research at the moment with Cardiff University on why young people aren't engaging, because I think it's, you know, there's a lot of assumptions that young people are the ones really driving forward climate action and, you know, really caring about the planet, but actually that's not really converting into day-to-day changes in their behaviour. So I'm interested to see, once we have that research, how we can then break down some of those barriers and get young people engaged. But also looking into the future, we're doing a little bit more work, which I know a lot of the organisations here are, on kind of permanent repair spaces and how repair cafes may be able to kind of move into the high street in terms of getting people more engaged, but also in terms of, you know, traditional retail isn't cutting it anymore. We have so many empty high street shops, and can repair cafes be used to fill some of those spaces and to get people slightly more engaged with social economy initiatives and to start to normalise that a little bit more. So I think we'll see more of that. I also think we may see kind of changes in how we're repairing. So we're seeing lots of talk about 3D printing at the moment. Definitely, you know, not something we can use at a community level at the moment. There's lots of challenges there, but I think it might be something that becomes slightly more common as we move forward and as the technology develops.
Yeah, I mean, again, just very practical COVID things linked to 3D. Our 3D printing expert, we'd set it up, got it going, trialing it, and then he moved to Scotland because he'd fed up with Brexit. So we got this sort of discontinuity aspect we're seeing. So absolutely. Again, Tom, where do you see it going next few years?
I see it a bit like Martine, because it's becoming a very important part of the infrastructure for a circular society itself, because this is where the power of civil society will take place. There are some very important issues are formulated on how to find this empowerment we all need to get this big transformation really done. And in Germany, at least, the repair cafe makers, doers, repairers will be seen as professionals like those who earn their money with, because there's enough proof. We've found enough proof for that. And that's a very important step towards the right to repair on an individual level in the EU. So I see the numbers growing and the intensity growing.
And just a quick reflection back on the youth issue is that because we're sort of university town, we organised a project related to some social media students who really didn't want to go to the repair cafe, but their program director set as a project. So once they got there, you know, which they didn't want to be, they really liked it. Once they engaged and saw the repair process, there's something about getting them there to get it in the experience of repair that I think is something quite interesting for Gen Z and others. Nicole, do you have any thoughts about future?
Just that we've noticed a sort of cohort of young engineers coming through that are coming through companies that, you know, wanting to act on their CSR policy. And so they are sending us their fantastic engineers. We're in Cambridge, so we're lucky. We've got the university and we've got a massive tech industry. And we've had 2 companies recently sending their engineers over to us, and they tend to be younger. So that's been amazing.
So Jessica, any comments on future?
Yep. So I think in our future, as you mentioned, Martin, we are a pretty young group of volunteers and pretty amateur still. And I think that that's something actually that lowers the bar for entry for others to join us, that it's not something that is unattainable, but we really want to keep that spirit of, you know, you don't have to be an expert to repair a lot of your things. We still have a couple of experts that help out with the more tricky repairs, but we want to make it something that is more accessible and not black boxed for people. So that is something that we want to continue to have. We would love to have more range of ages coming in and building up that community. But we really want it to be something that is sharing knowledge, not just coming with the knowledge already, and something that then is seen as accessible for all. So that's what we'll be working on in the next few years.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think because your model is quite different, it's very interesting. You've got a very interesting model about engaging the youth. And as you say, hive mind, you've got this sort of bottom up thing. And it's sort of just really interesting to me, with Sweden being an advanced country in terms of sustainability. The other question is, why are the older people not engaging in the report? But that's a conversation for another point. And I want to just pick up on some of the questions that came in, you know, that, you know, before we go into the breakouts, and please, anybody respond to any of this. So one of the issues that's emerged is well, there's two perhaps in the early questions that came in, was the issue about time to do repairs, people taking repairs home, how you manage that. I won't say anything on our side, you know, but, you know, this is something we recognize, but also a little bit how you validate the repairers coming in, your recruitment of new repairers in terms of the skills and knowledge. I don't know if anybody wants to sort of kick off on this. You know, the issue almost of some people say, well, should we restrict this to 25 minutes per repair and then stop after that? Or, you know, how are you managing this? Do you have people taking repairs home? There's issues there in terms of insurance at the venue or the, you know, the people's workshops. So any comments on this? These are there is. I know who wants to kick off. Maybe Phoebe and then Jessica.
Okay, can I come in there, Martin, please?
Yep, if you could come in. I saw their hands go up first, so after those two, Kate, please come in. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've definitely found that the success rate of a fix went up when people were taking repairs home during COVID, and also in our permanent shop space where the volunteers have more time. It goes from about 65% up to sometimes 80% in the permanent spaces. So there is a significant difference when you've got more time. But what you gain in the success of the repair, you lose in the social side. So I think it's that balance between, yes, we're fixing a little bit more, but we're having less of those conversations and less of the well-being and social benefits. And I guess it's where you place that value. And we've thought about extending the time of a repair cafe to allow those success rates to go up. But again, there's a balance between asking too much of the volunteers and, you know, dragging out that event a little bit too much. And I think for us, 3 hours tends to be that sweet spot where you're fixing the majority of the stuff, but you're not asking too much of people and taking too much of their time. But yeah, I guess it's where you place that value. And in terms of
that issue of the balance is really important. People don't want to be, they want to be busy, but they don't want to be too busy. And we have also a challenge to stop some of our core repairers taking too much home because we feel they take. But anyway, Jessica and then Kate.
Yeah, I can say that we don't take it home as repairs in ours. Because I think also when we talk about the balance there with what Phoebe's talking about, we've discussed that a lot as a group too, about having both, you know, an environmental balance. We want the things to be fixed, but we also want people to be doing those fixes. So we do run our repair cafes regularly. So every 2 weeks, we always tell people you can bring it back. And if they need, so we do it to a point, and then we say, now you're going to need to get those spare parts. You have 2 weeks, then come back. We really want them to be part of that repair process, and we don't do it for them, partially also because that's our ethos, but also because we just don't have the skills to do it to that level either. So yeah, it keeps it open for more of our volunteers to be involved.
Okay, Kate. have the floor.
Can't hear you, Martin, sorry. We don't, as a rule, suggest our repairers take things home. If they want to, that's fine, but they do it as like a private arrangement. We don't do it within the Repair Cafe sort of ethos, as it were, or organisation. In terms of time, we allow roughly 45 minutes to an hour for each slot, and we do bookings, and we do some sort of triage so people know what's coming in so they could be prepared, and the people who are coming in can perhaps bring spares. That ups our success rate significantly. And you mentioned new repairers. We always have volunteers working alongside an experienced volunteer to start with at least their first Repair Cafe, to make sure we're happy with their skill level.
Great. I mean,
thank you.
No problem. And again, just as another context for this, you know, in our side, we do allow some of them are really experienced repairers to take products home, because within our insurance policy, we're covered in the product liability. So, you know, this also helps extend the repair rate. The issue we've recently had is some new repairers have pack testing equipment that they've been using to pack test. But we've recently, just actually on Monday, made a decision that all electrical products need to come back through our pack tester, because we know that certification of that is up to date and it's functioning properly. We don't necessarily know about other people's equipment. So yeah, there is various models, like we're saying, for everybody here. So again, in terms of recruiting people, do any of you have a formal process for your repair cafes? You know, do you meet them initially? Do you assess particularly their electrical skills? So how do you go about the vetting of your repairers? Anybody want to make a comment on that? Yeah, sure.
Just building on what Kate said, you know, I mean, we're organisers, Kate and I, we're kind of admin people and project management people. We are not electronics. I haven't got a clue about that stuff. So the only way that we can check that someone has the skills that they have is to sit them alongside someone who's experienced. I mean, we don't do that for sewing or some general DIY repairs, but we would do that for electricals, electronics and bicycles, because obviously we don't know if someone can really fix a bike, and we don't want anyone to leave and zooming off down a hill with someone who doesn't know what they're doing. So yeah, that mentoring is key for us.
I mean, to preempt that on our side with the new repairers, we developed a simple checklist around different elements of electricals that we ask them to fill in before they have sort of informal conversations, and then, you know, they work as a team, you know, and teamwork is that we're finding really important with particularly electrical and mechanical. So absolutely. Any other comments on the sort of recruitment and process and anything on that? Yeah, Phoebe?
I think for us, we ask that volunteers are competent and feel confident, and that sometimes scares organisers a little bit, that it's, you know, we're not just asking for professional fixers. But I think if we limited it to people who were, you know, professional seamstresses or professional electricians, we would miss out on a huge amount of skill. We have so many skilled people that have been, you know, sewing for 40 years or tinkering away in their garage, you know, being taught by their dad or whatever it might be. And they have huge amounts of skills. And if we limited that to people who were only sort of professional fixers, I think our repair cafes wouldn't function. So we do a process very similar to what you and Nicole have both described, where we will sit people with people who we know are, you know, competent and confident, and get them to kind of informally assess their skills. But apart from pack testing, with pack testing, we use an online course, and the volunteers get a certificate, so that we've got a little bit of kind of risk mitigation there. But I think it would be a shame to only focus on professional fixers. I think we would lose out on a huge amount of resource and skill in our community.
Jessica, yeah, see your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with Phoebe. If we vetted ours, we wouldn't have a repair cafe, unfortunately. But we have a lot. I mean, we have people that are architects and things like this that are just into tech and into repair, and they know what they know. A lot of the times, they know why they're coming to a repair cafe to volunteer. We do have some that are there to just watch and learn, and they come and they say, I don't know anything. I'm here to watch and learn. So we know we're not going to put them by themselves. We're not going to ask them to do anything everything by themselves. We have those that are quite comfortable with following an iFixit guide. So we do know, I think we're a small enough community that we're talking openly, and we just have two that are actually electrical engineers, and we know that they're the ones to go to whenever we're getting something that's plugging in, and to also then we limit what we can repair as well.
Just one other observation for our experience. We've had some who have perhaps experienced some level of experience, and they've come along, but they just found the pressure of doing repairs too uncomfortable. It's just, and we've seen them then leave after a period of time because of, you know, maybe confidence, maybe some other challenges they might be facing. Did you have any, to close this one off, Tom, did you have any comments?
I can only agree with Phoebe that the competences are on a high level, and what you don't know, for example, to test the electrical thingies afterwards, this is something that can easily learn. There is a one-day course to do so, and so everyone is fine. But there are not only electronics, there are also toys, garden stuff, woodworking, metal stuff. There's a lot of things break, a lot of things need to be repaired, not only electronic gadgets.
No, absolutely. And my comment there related to electronics as one part of a whole series of repair stations. It's just that electronics is the area of higher risk and the area of greater complexity. So that's why we've formalized a little bit more on the electronic side than the other sectors. So I'd like to thank everybody very much for their comments and observations. I think we've got so much richness in the conversation. What I'm going to do, whilst I hopefully put you into the breakout rooms, and this has been a technical challenge for us to work this through, but hopefully you're all going to go into the different breakout rooms in a minute that you've chosen around funding, insurance, recruitment, 3D printing, or engaging with young people. And what I will try and do while you're in the breakout rooms, I will try and go through the 70 comments in the chat to see if there's some core set of questions that are emerging from that, and I'll bring that up in the when we come back to the main hall, in you know, metaphorical main hall in a few minutes. So hopefully you're all going to be distributed to breakout rooms now. So hopefully 98% of you ended up in the rooms you wanted to be in. Honestly, we tested and tested to make sure that everybody was allocated automatically to the rooms of their choice, but somehow Zoom didn't get the right game with us. I really don't know. But anyway, I hope you got roughly something out of all your discussions, even if it wasn't necessarily what you were expecting. And as I say, we always have to adapt. So I don't know if I think we've got 64 people back, so there's quite a lot of people still here, which is good to see. And I don't know if Alex is back from his room. Are you there, Alex? I think I can see Alex is there. Do you want to unmute yourself and just give us, you know, some key points that emerge from your discussion?
Yes, thank you very much, Martin. We had a small group and at various stages in the journey. So we had Nicole in Switzerland, who had been running a Café from 2015, 2016. So the most mature of the lot, probably not the most mature. We had Gemma as well, who's running a series of pop-up repair cafes in Buckinghamshire, and doing them quite successfully. And then we had Oren in Israel, who is just setting up, and I've got our first Sutton Repair Cafe soft launch next Saturday. So we had a mix of maturity there in terms of the journey itself and in terms of funding. So what we found, I'm going to just talk about the funding piece, was that each of them had approached the funding piece in a different direction. So Nicole was largely self-funded, but with funds access to funds from a larger repair cafe, but was now reaching the limits of her group's capabilities. So it's self-funded, people funding from their own pockets kind of thing, and from the repairs that they were charging for, which were discretionary and so on, but now looking for external funding in order to scale. In our case, we have got some grant funding. We have got some business funding from the founders, that is us, but we got a brilliant idea from Gemma, who's working with a local recycling company, and who recycling companies like Veolia and so on have got funds especially for this kind of reuse and repair activities. And she's sort of got tapping into those funds so that she can set up pop-up repair cafes and does them very frequently and so on and so forth. So in all our communities, I think we can probably find recycling companies who have deeper pockets and who have funds for these kind of activities. So that I think is a great idea that we should tap on in. What Oren was saying with respect to funding was he was having obviously cultural differences in Israel and so on and so forth. So I think the consensus was, once the launch happens, once people are aware of that experience, and the local press is there, the mayor maybe, all of those kind of things, people want to be part of a larger group, and therefore funding will come this way and that way, from grants, from councillors will come forward. Everyone wants a slice of the action. So I think the consensus, as we said in the main room earlier as well, was that funding is an important part, but it's not the important part. You need to have energy, you need to have people who really want to make a difference, and then you need to get them to do something, create that awareness, and then tap into the source of funding that they can see. And it's going to be a mix of government funding, grant funding, community funding, as well as business funding.
Great, thanks very much, Alex. And just again from our experience, I mean, and as others have said, and exactly as you've expressed it very well, is that funding is not the only thing. It's and I think, as Phoebe was saying with her model, the first thing is you've got to find that committed individual in the team to drive it. I think there is also the opportunity for sponsored venues as well, because often the venue per session could be the highest cost, and if you can get a good relationship with a venue, you remove that cost. So it's also about isolating where your costs are, and certainly, again, talking from our experience, we negate the venue costs because of a collaboration, but we then donate back a proportion of our donations to secure the venue. Our other, main are insurance, but it's not significant. And coffees and teas for our volunteers. And then what we've instigated was, again, and it was one of the comments that came in the chat, looking after your repairers. Repair cafes are about people. If they're not having a good time there, they will go. So it's about rewarding them. And what we instigated is the annual dinner, which was very popular with the partners of the repairers, and then we are actually going to do a barbecue. So looking after your people is really important, again from our experience. So and it's not just about the money, but money is important, particularly in the early phases, until you get a model working. A lot of, and I imagine it's true not just in the UK but also in other countries, local authorities and you know, councillors will have small grants available, particularly for new projects that contribute back to the local community. And that's something to explore if you're new in the process. So I'll stop waffling on here and I'll pass on to Tom about insurance, what propped up in your insurance conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. We discussed different models. We found out that there is not the one solution. It always depends on how these legal questions are interpreted. The interpretation is a big range. If it's about product liability, or is it liability for what you do? And different solutions were found. One important thing, two important things I think we discussed. Please, Ian, I think you're a good sidekick if I forget something. We discussed the disclaimer question. Is it enough to say, come on, you know what you're doing here? This is not a free of cost service for professional repair. You know that, so everything's covered. No, it's not. That is a method of raising awareness, but not a legal and not an insurance thing. And we discussed the PAT testing, that some insurances are keen on that you have a proper testing of your electrical devices that you give away or that come in. But we discussed the things that come in, they will not pass PAT testing often. And yeah, we also discussed the different costs, very big range from under 100 euro to more than a couple of hundreds, whatever you your money is. And the good thing is to find a bigger organization, to find umbrella organization which is maybe like-minded and can cover this operating site thing, because that is what is taking place, that you have an operating site if it's only temporary. Yeah, and we shared nice stories, and we shared some statistics about it in different ways. And I doubt that there will be a global solution for that.
Again, thanks, Tom. And again, just from our observation and experience, I mean, my understanding in the Netherlands, there's a block insurance policy for repair cafes, but I don't think that exists in other countries. Certainly when we set up in 2014, the biggest problem we had was insurance companies understanding what a repair cafe was. That a lot of them said, "Where'd you get the coffee?" And we had huge problems, particularly with electricals. They perceived a lot of risk with the electricals, and a lot of the premiums that we initially quoted were huge. And so it took us a long time to do that. And actually, it goes back to that soft, as somebody put it in the chat, the soft power of the local government is through when we were transitioning from to our charitable status, we piggybacked on the insurance of our town council. So because we built up a good relationship, they brought us into their insurance policy in the transition. And that helped us find an insurer with an incredibly low cost, relatively low cost insurance premium. And so circuitously, we found the right insurer with the right price, who understood what we were doing. So it's all about these connections. So it's sort of interesting. I 100% agree, Tom. I don't think there is going to be a global solution, but we've certainly noticed when we ran our physical event before lockdown, suddenly we got insurance salesmen turning up to our physical conference because they realized, you know, their repair cafes were growing and they saw it as a market opportunity. But I am aware that even some of what I would think was the really advanced repair cafes, surprisingly to me, even in the US, don't take any insurance. I physically will not run a repair cafe unless I've got the insurance in place, because my experience in life is the one time you don't do something like that, the one time something happens. But anyway, we can pick up some of these conversations, and please, people, disagree with me if I'm saying anything you don't agree with. But I'll now pass
one last statement to that.
Yes, sorry.
If we share the national solutions from a free of charge insurance in Austria, but the repair cafe has to offer some data, to the subsidiary model that we're close to establish in Germany, so all covered, which are doing this type of activities, maybe this helps to find the right discussion with the national and the local authorities about this issue.
So that is that an insurance policy for all the German repair cafes, or sorry, I didn't understand the model you meant there, Tom. Sorry.
It's a subsidiary model. So if there is no other, then there is one that covers all.
Okay, so there are different models emerging just in different places and in different systems. So that's interesting. So I'll now pass across to Sandy and team, because I'm not 100% certain exactly who ended up in that group on recruitment of volunteers and customers, and what were the key things that emerged from your discussion there, Sandy.
Thanks. Yeah, so we had a really nice discussion about recruiting volunteers. So the general consensus was that the really important thing was a kind of bottom-up kind of community instigator, that this isn't about going in somewhere and recruiting people and setting stuff up, that has to sort of come from the bottom up. And then we talked a bit about kind of building that and reaching out to other groups. So we had examples, so reaching out to young people with sort of success with something called Meetup, recent retirees, so in Brussels with the European Commission kind of saying that people who are kind of, not working so much anymore, kind of reaching out to them and targeting them. In Wales about referrals, so from GPs for also mental health and all sorts of kind of community stuff. A science park recruitment fair in Cambridge, so really targeting tech companies and having a kind of physical event at lunchtime with food vans around to kind of get some interest, some more volunteers. A really good one about asking volunteers to kind of got some good volunteers just sort of snowballing from that, because good people tend to know good people. And also about media, so because repair cafes are just such kind of good news stories, that can also be a really good way to recruit. So if you do have press coming to your events, to kind of make the point as well about how volunteers can get in touch, so that if people want to get involved, they can do. The general consensus was that retention wasn't a problem, that sort of generally once you've got people in the door, then they're happy to kind of keep going, and they generally really enjoy it. The most important thing is just run a good event. We had a really good comment from Cambridge about just having a volunteer to look after the volunteers, so just kind of teas and coffees and that sort of thing to kind of make sure people are looked after and don't sort of feel exploited. And then when we moved on to customers, so very, very strong feeling that customers is not the right word, that it's far too transactional, and that it kind of puts certain expectations on the kind of, that this is much more of a community event. And so words that were used by people in our group were visitor, participant, repairee, bringer. We had a nice comment about repairers also being bringers, so just because you're not kind of either or, everyone's kind of sharing and learning from each other. We had a conversation about customer or bringer, or whatever you want to call them, participant expectations. The general consensus was that they were exceeded rather than that people were kind of leaving disappointed, but we had a good conversation about that it's important to kind of upfront set out, you know, what people can expect, whether that's by email before or kind of on the door. We talked about feedback and how that can be really helpful for repairers as well, kind of sharing that with repairers. And Nicole gave a really nice example from Belfast, where they apparently put blank kind of posters on the wall, and then people who've had things repaired can kind of draw or write a story about what they've had repaired, and then when the repairers leave they can kind of see that. Then you can also take photos of it for social media, which just seemed like a really lovely way of kind of sharing in the positive sort of quality of the event. We talked about walk-ins versus drop-offs, sort of what was kind of preferred, and generally, you know, there's clearly pros and cons of the two, but the one thing that everyone agreed on is that triage is really important for both, so that you're not having people kind of waiting around with something that just isn't going to be repaired, and that it's really important to have some sort of system to kind of quickly assess whether it's going to be repairable or not. And there's sort of dumpster divers that kind of come and get things repaired and then sell them on, and I think the general consensus was just that might happen, but that you just kind of put up with it, don't allow repeat offenders, and try and kind of, if you notice it, then yeah, not allow it, but that might just be a side effect of things. But yeah, and that was it.
Okay, great. I mean, that's another thing that's cropped up over the years for us, is having policies in place around certain issues. And for so everybody's clear and consistent on how they approach things. So that's a sort of generic point around things like, for example, do you take, or do you have the capacity to take, particularly for the singular repair cafes rather than networks, products? Because we, for example, we have people wanting to donate a product to them, and we say, sorry, we don't take that because we haven't got a capacity to, you know, set up a reuse. But what we've set up on our website is local reuse scheme, so we refer them back to the reuse thing. But that's just an example about, if you get these frequently asked things that you don't have the capacity to deal with, having an approach and a consistent approach from your front desk. The other just quick thing that I wanted to ask there, you know, and again, it's the youth side, it's the meetup point, it's the need for different techniques and strategies to engage with youth. And was there any comment both in terms of younger customers as well as younger repairers? Because again, we don't see too many single young people coming, particularly an issue we have with the university is they're probably asleep on a Saturday morning. So, but it's, you know, anything about younger customers, not just the actual repairers.
I think maybe Jessica, you mentioned about having a kind of younger audience, so maybe you're best placed to kind of reply to that.
Yeah, and I was saying that we lower the barriers a lot. So it's a lot of what I was saying in the panel discussion as well. The meetup groups was really good for attracting a lot of young groups and making it a social thing. And I just also put in the chat too that a lot of our dumpster diver people are the young people that are going into the dumpsters, and they're not coming like, I must repair this and then I'm going to sell it on, but more that that's their entry point for being interested in it. So we're fine helping them. And we're also like, if they come multiple times, usually by the second time, they're happy to just tinker with it themselves. So that actually is a good point of entry for us too, that a lot of the youth are dumpster diving these days.
Two interesting points. Interested, just because your model is, do you get younger customers? I'm interested in the younger customer side, because that's a sort of a thing that is not, the demographics generally generally, and this is why your case is so interesting, both in terms of the repairers and others, is do you get also younger customers coming, or do they also tend to be just more sort of broadly interested in this tinkering? They'll bring something, they want to chat to people, sit down, share some knowledge and experience. So it's more about the hacking, the product hacking, rather than the repair.
We're also in a student, Lund and Malmö both have universities. So there we get a lot of students coming in. Yeah, too. So we get a lot of young groups. And I think that also is because we're connected to a library of things that is very much connected to the student community. So then they know, okay, here's where I get things if I want to rent them. And then they also know where they can repair them and learn about repairing. So we actually get a lot of through the students, to the university students that way.
As individuals wanting products to repair, to have products repaired, or more for the hacking, tinkering, engagement in experimentation?
The dumpster diving is experimentation. The students are repairing their own stuff. Yeah.
So they're repairing their own stuff. Yeah. Yours is very interesting compared to everybody else. So I think you need to do a masterclass on how to engage youth. I think a lot of people will be interested in that. So I think we've then got Annika and Astrid on 3D printing.
Yes, that's right. Our findings were, I'm just going to put the bullets in here so I can read them better. I think our key message that we want to bring across is that the repairers don't have to have the skills of 3D printing or 3D designing themselves. We'd rather recommend to form a network with people who are already having this skill. Younger people, maybe who are engineer students or people in maker spaces, they usually know a lot about 3D printing, and combining those two forces usually gets you far. So don't try as a repairer to learn this very complex skill yourself. Just ask people who are already fit in 3D designing. Yeah, good thing is find out whether there's a makerspace in your region, and maybe host an event for connecting those two. Yeah, on the spot repairs are usually not possible. The process is more like if the guest has to get a spare part and come back for the next event. So this would be a similar process. Find out what part is broken, then it has to be designed in the meantime. And when you come back for the next repair event, you can fix the device. That's more the process. It always comes up. That's why I'm mentioning it. 3D scanning is not an option yet. I think it's going to be in the future, a couple of years to go. But right now, the scanners are not. The quality of the scans is not good enough. So doing the design from scratch is usually the right process. And if you think the topic is interesting, if you're interested in matchmaking 3D printing repair cases and people who are fit in 3D designing, or if you are fit in 3D designing yourself or know somebody, feel free to get in contact with us, email us. We're going to put you on a mailing list and get you involved in the network.
Again, from our experience, we imported a 3D printer from where did we work from? Czech Republic, and as a result of Brexit, we found that they were no longer to support a 3D printer in the UK. So, but what we did to start off with is the guy who managed that, he started off by 3D printing a clamp, a tool, just to test it. And then what we were able to do was to produce a customized 3D design for a broken GoPro camera, but also some other specific items. But what we've also found was when we were having it up and running before the pandemic is that showing the 3D printing process with an example was really good for the kids. They really liked it. And that's something we're literally real life trying to recruit a new volunteer with the expertise both in the hardware and the software to get it back and up and running again. So that's another tip. It's just to demonstrating, the process is actually really interesting for the young kids. That's what we found.
Yeah, absolutely. And the what you mentioned, this show and tell, we found that it opens the minds of the repairers as well, because often or not, you don't recognize a case that would be suitable for 3D printing if you haven't seen the process of 3D printing before. And once you've seen how a spare part is built in the 3D printer, usually it's like a switch is turned, and people are like, oh yeah, this could be a case, and this I don't know, the last time we couldn't fix this, but this could be a 3D printing case. So yeah, brilliant point to add. Yeah.
No, but I think that is a really important point. Show and tell, key word. People have to see it to understand what can be done, other than perhaps the 2 or 3 that might be in your repair cafe who are advanced enough to be there. The second or third tier of the repairers with different levels of knowledge will need to see it and get interested and motivated to understand, and then look on the videos, etc. So I think I recognize absolutely that key point. And again, it comes back into a comment in the chat, which is generally speaking, a repair cafe, the whole observation of the repair process is a really important point in people understanding and observing. And that's also part of the behavioral change. What we found by having a process where they can't just dump the product, go off and get a cup of coffee and come back, by observing the process, what we were able to do and follow up with research, is it showed that it gave them enough confidence, a number of people, to go off and repair products themselves, and a number of those to repair products successfully. So in terms of behavioral change and impact, that observation point is really important, I think. Show and tell, good phrase. So last but no means least, Lillian, on youth, what cropped up?
Thank you, Martin. Yeah, so we had an interesting conversation around the different experiences in terms of engaging with youth and the challenges identified as well as the learnings. So the majority of the repair cafes here, seen that both visitors and volunteers are from 40 to 70. So in terms of engaging with youth, one of the main challenges is retention. So once you engage with younger visitors, it tends to be a one-off event. Yeah, that's one of the main challenges. And then we had an experience from Holland where they tried different like repair camps, demolition sessions, attend fairs at schools, and after trying to engage with the children, they realized nothing was working. But they identified that it's actually the parents or the mothers that they should be addressing first to engage with the children. So once you engage with the parents, then they will encourage the children to attend these sessions. So it's about seeding that interest with the parents. And then also Lorna shared sort of the development of material to engage with primary school children. So they're developing an animation on how to reduce waste that also includes repair. So again, maybe developing material that will facilitate this engagement with children. And then, yeah, so again, how to engage with attending primaries sessions, but yeah, it's about the repairing skill of the parents as well, and the mindset of the parents that will then sort of trickle down to the young volunteers or visitors. And then there was also an experience from Tracy that had to do with the venue and the location of the venue. So because they're in a church in the centre of in the city centre, it means that families pass by, so they come in, they visit, they're with their children. But then having a background in law, what was also raised is that you know, in the UK, you would have to have DBS checks if you are to engage with minors. So that's also a consideration, the legal aspects of engaging with younger visitors or volunteers. I don't believe this was an issue in other repair cafes in terms of having sort of insurance to engage with. Right. And then also the type of products that are brought in was also discussed. So the majority is soft toys. This is something that is generally brought in and also sort of helps engage with children. Toys. Then we also discussed in terms of how we could sell sort of the repair cafe as an experience. So from the UK, when 17-year-olds are applying for university, they have to write a personal statement. So maybe having experience at the repair cafe could help them sort of write their personal experience as having engaged with a repair cafe if they're going to engineering. And then, so I think those were the main points from how to engage.
Thanks, Lily. I think that connection with the parents is really important. I mean, we have an example at the moment of a sort of brilliant young 14-year-old lad who's come along. He initially has come along with his father, and his father has been there just as support, but probably also to see how the process works. And as the lad has got mentored by one of our senior repairers, the father's still coming and looking to, get more involved. So I think that link to the parents is really interesting. What we have also in the UK is something called the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And essentially this is an award where kids or young adults will go. Initially it was always going out and, learning, going on walks and hikes and outdoor activities. But over the last few years, now working with the community is part of the Duke of Edinburgh's Award. And we've had 2 young people on front desk that have come through that. And you've seen the growth of the kids. Amazing how they've started off really nervous, on the front desk, but then have got a lot of confidence. So it's been a sort of an element of personal development there, So I think this youth element is quite complicated, but really obviously important going into the future. What I did in the time whilst you guys were chatting away is I tried to go through all the chat, and I've come up with just some observations from the chat, and I'll do the best I can to feed back. And then if anybody has any particular points they want to make, happy to open it to the floor. So I'm just going to literally run through what I picked up, and sorry if I didn't pick up anything or got something misinterpreted. So there was a question there about this sort of collaboration with, how to collaborate with electronics waste disposal in local areas. And I think we heard some examples about collaboration there. A very interesting comment about repair cafes almost as a utopia. This is what the world should look like. Friendly people working together, happy, high levels of satisfaction, products getting repaired. So this sort of idea of a mini utopia, this is what society should look like, not just in an environmental sense, but a social sense, because of that social capital that is built within repair cafes. I think that's a really interesting point. This whole issue of off-site repairs cropped up quite a lot, and there were some questions there about how people do with that. Some repair cafes, if people take the product off-site, then the repair cafe then cuts that loose, and then the individual has a conversation with the customer outside the repair cafe. And in some instances, it sounds like people will charge for that service. in some instances, and this is where we have a problem with the insurance, I know that our insurance policy will cover our repairers in their workshops. That's maybe because we've a written health and safety policy. We've demonstrated our approach to the repairers. Another, repair cafe said that when their repairers take stuff home, it's not covered under their insurance. The individuals have to take on the individual responsibility there. So this is, again, this lack of a clear joined up picture even within the UK, let alone in Europe or the world. Another question emerged around how people deal with the components. I mean, I can ask from our side is that essentially we made, they may diagnose a problem and then diagnose the component that is needed. Then what we ask is for the customer to buy the component and then to bring that to the next session where the product is then fixed. So there's this sort of issue about the transients, and we have a system to monitor all that just on our side. General comment there about repair cafes, really important in communities about creating awareness. The sort of, again, this idea of repair cafes sitting within a broader repair cafe ecosystem. So the repair cafes are not the panacea, but they're part of a broader approach that should be looked at within a local community. This whole issue of learning by doing, learning by observation, we discussed before. Some repair cafes, and probably the larger networks, I think, getting almost into refurbishment, taking products, refurbish them, and then reselling them even to Africa for funds. So this is sort of broader than repair, perhaps facilitated more by the broader networks with more of a central core resource. This idea of soft power of communities, somebody made the point that, the actual practical action shown by repair cafes in actually doing stuff is more likely to influence things than politicians saying it's important. So the community showing the activity and the impact may be actually is more important than some politicians' rhetoric. It may have more impact. So I thought that was quite an interesting point. The whole issue of getting stuff on the TV, important issue, getting the message out there, visibility, and something, a very UK thing, we've had the emergence of a TV program that started on our 4th channel and now is on our 1st channel, called The Repair Shop. And we get a lot of people coming in and asking them, are you the repair shop? And we have to explain it's slightly different from that, but that's actually perhaps another. So this is for other people outside the UK. This is, in a sense, it's a customized set of repairs that people are doing from across, interesting repairs with interesting stories, and it's catching a lot of interest. This whole issue of older people visiting repair cafes, the older generation, apart from Sweden, being a lot of the core repairers, how to engage with youth. Insurance, this broader issue of insurance. The drop-off systems worked well under COVID and increased repair rates, but it didn't generate that social capital. So, that the organization of pre-booking systems, actually, because there was probably more vetting going on, it has actually increased the repair rates. Again, we found that with our system. We moved during COVID to an online booking system because of the amazing skills that we had in our repair cafe to do it. But we have not gone back to that after we've dropped it, after COVID. We've gone back to our old system because it's about people as much as the repair. There's some question here about there's something emerging, I think, from Martine in Australia and New Zealand, where because of the cost of living crisis, that there are challenges now with getting some of the repairers, and some of the repairers requesting to be paid rather than not volunteering. So that was sort of quite an interesting left field point. I mean, and something has emerged from our point of view. You know, are we going to see more people coming to get products repaired, not for environmental reasons, but for economic reasons? I.e., they just don't have enough money. An issue we observed in another repair cafe near us that had been not set up by citizens but a local authority is they targeted a repair cafe in a part of the sort of city that had lower per capita income, but it didn't work because those people who didn't have the money didn't want to be seen to be bringing a product into the repair cafe. They wanted the new product. So you can see that complex social dynamic there. Looking after repairers was key. You know, a number of comments about this, how you look after your repairers, coffees and teas, dinners, you know, etc., barbecues, you know. And a number of people made the comment that CV-19 has changed, you know, the operations, has created innovation. You know, as we heard before, there'd been experimentation. Some things worked, some things didn't. You know, some things have been retained, and maybe that's and some things not. And that's maybe quite an interesting thing to look further. In terms of numbers, what we had was a mixed picture of comments. Some people were saying numbers are down, some people are saying numbers are the same, and some people are saying numbers are up. So again, it's the benchmark from where you started. For example, for us, we would be, you know, as our specific 1 in a 40,000 population market town, we would be about 70 to 80 overall attendance at a session. It's around 57, 58 now, so we're down. I mean, what we're finding from the repairers, or some of the repairers, is saying they're much comfortable with that because they don't want to feel under pressure. There's this tension with repairers about being busy, or and we've had a number of conversations about feeling like they're back in working again. It's having time to do this, but have a chat and not feeling too much pressure. So this area of the balance is a really important point, at least from our experience. And I think the last 2 points, just for time here, is there was a very, I think was an example from Italy where they took the repair cafe into a school of 11 to 14-year-olds, and they found that worked really well. And I think a very particular British thing, I think our team took something out to the Brownies, which is a local group of young girls, and that worked very well. But I mean, part of this is the challenge about being reactive. You know, you react to the youth inquiries, or you go out more proactively, like we're seeing with people, and that's adapt this year of scale and motivation, you know, and how you manage it all. And I think a very last interesting point, there was somebody a point saying that they wondered if measurement was a key thing. They felt that it was as much as anything about that social capital, which is much more difficult to measure. I mean, certainly from our side, and I know a number of others, we meticulously measure our, you know, our repair rates, you know, our landfill diversion, carbon reduction, and we developed this repair carbon tool that you can calculate carbon savings from your repairs based on weight. And that's been adopted in a whole series of countries around the world now. But yeah, this point about measurement, you know, yeah, and particularly, I guess, how you measure the social side. I mean, we simply measure it on an exit questionnaire based on a level of satisfaction. So we although it's not 100% sampling, we still retain a 98% satisfaction level. Obviously, those that have completed the questionnaire, but that's, you know, just measuring the social capital or social metrics of this, I think, is an important. So I'll shut up there. And if anybody wants to make a comment or a question, we're beyond 6 o'clock, you know, so there is please feel free to leave if you wish. But if anybody wants to wave a hand or put their electronic hand off and make a comment, you know, please feel free to do that. Did I see a hand from there, Peter Moy? I don't know, or maybe it was just gesticulate. No, it wasn't. Do we have any comments or questions? Anybody want to make any final points? If not, I'll give it 15 seconds. Anybody last comments or thoughts? So great. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you got, as I say on these things, at least one thing that was new out of this or made you think. We've had requests to share the chat. I think we'll do that with those that attended. We will make the recording available. Unfortunately, without all the technology issues, I won't bore you with my day, but my technology issues started at 10:30 in the morning with some, you know, from very challenging problems on other things. But we will share the recording with people. We missed the first few minutes of that, but hopefully there's enough richness in the presentations and discussions from that you can you know, listen to that if you're interested, or share with your colleagues. So anyway, thank you all very much. I hope you found it useful, and
bye everybody.
See you maybe next year. I don't know, we'll see. Okay, great, thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for speakers and facilitators and everybody. Thank you. Cheers. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Okay. Good luck with the launch, soft launch.